All right, we're recording. So it is February the 4th, 7 p.m., and this is MELS 602 clinical coach session. I'm glad everybody is able to join us this evening. And if not, and you're watching this through recording, then I hope you're doing well also. Before we start off this evening, does anybody have any burning questions in regards to task 1, task 2, the recording I sent out for task 2, and then the pacing guide I sent out? Anybody got any questions this evening? All right. All right. Well, either you have questions and you're waiting, or I did such a good job on the recording and you were so happy with the pacing guide that you don't have any questions. But, as always, if you end up having any questions, please feel free to stop me or enter them in the chat box. So let's go ahead and get started. Then we have gone through Absol Task 1 and Task 2 as far as me kind of giving you information on those items. So what we got on the agenda tonight is to talk about Absol Task 3 and 4, which the good news is that's it. Did I say Absol? Somebody should have stopped me. I was doing some emails with my 601 class right before I got online. Sorry about that. Aptal with the T, the Aptal. So you guys need to stop me when I make mistakes like that. Anyway, Aptal Task 1 and Task 2 on the agenda for tonight is Aptal Task 3 and 4. And like I said, the good news is that's it for the Aptal. There's just 4 tasks. The fourth one being reflections. And I'm going to tell you, I saw one cute little face, not that y'all not cute, but I saw one cute little face that was in Mrs. Smith's screen, and now I'm seeing a cute little face in Miss Cochran's screen. So I would like to tell our special guest hello and welcome to the class. I love seeing those little faces. Thank you so much. That just makes my day when I see those. So anyway, getting back, as tonight we're going to talk about Absol 3 and 4. 4 just being the reflection. I did it again. 4 just being reflection of the Aptal. And then just kind of wanted to really poll any of you to see if you have any questions about, there they are, everybody wave again, wave those, there we go. That's why we're all in this business right there. That is why we are all in this business. Okay, I'll get serious, I'm sorry. We'll get back on task. But really want to talk to you about your competency folio. Go into task stream just for a little bit, kind of see if you got any questions on that. I don't think anybody's got any questions on the process of submitting your Absol task for review, and then how they get into the Dropbox to be graded. I've got quite a few Absol task 1 over the last several days, and I appreciate that, and that's great. Appreciate your hard work on that. They're looking good. I don't know that I've had to make many suggestions whatsoever because they are really looking good. So let me share the scale handbook, and let's talk about Aptal Task 3. Aptal Task 3. Let me get my share screen pulled up. And you'll have to forgive me. I'm a little bit like I said, sometimes it's hard for me to transition from one cohort to the other. So I do apologize for relating or referencing some things in my 601 cohort with this group. In 602, as you know, task 1 of the Aptal, you did a research on best practices for teacher empowerment and leadership. Kind of from that research, you either used or created a checklist or survey to kind of poll or pull in some qualitative and quantitative data on your school in relation to the areas that you did your best practices research on. So that was task 1. if a good school is doing a great job, or a great school is doing a good job in terms of teacher leadership and teacher empowerment, what does research say should be present at that site? So you did that. Okay, now how can I look at my own school environment and see how are we measuring up compared to what research and best practice says? And you do that by creating a research instrument. You call it a visual checklist, you call it a research tool, call it a survey. There's a little bit of degree of flexibility on that. If you've reviewed your APTL template and your APTL helpful hints, kind of gives you some of that information. So you create that research tool, and then task 2 was all about going in and collecting that data. And part of that collection, part of that data, pulling in that data, was utilizing that research tool. And with the goal of identifying any gaps in those areas. So task 3 is you take that information, excuse me, you take that information and you pull a team of colleagues together. So you're pulling together another PLC team. Can it be the same PLC team that I used in the APSL for MELS 601? Yes, it can. Do I have to do a narrative on how I selected the participants and their strengths and so on, like I did in APSL task 1 in PLC team selection? The rubric doesn't address that. The prompts don't address that. They just tell you to pull a team together. So I'm not looking for that. If it's a new team and you want to discuss the dynamics of the team, I think that's good for the evaluator. I think that's good for the reader, just in kind of knowing where you're coming from. But as I said, it's not a requirement of the rubric. I'm not going to go through there and look and see if you've listed each person on the team and identified their strengths. Not going to do that for the APTL, but I think it is a good idea to discuss the dynamics of the team. If it was the same team you used in the PLC for the APSL, that's great. If it's a new team, that's great, but you may want to tell the reader, that this, if it is the same team, tell them it's the same team that you used in an action plan for student learning, or if it's a new team, why did you choose the new team? But anyway, you pull those individuals together, and you all together are going to look at this information. You're going to lead this. This is a candidate-led, just like the APSL was. This is a candidate-led, facilitated meeting. Could be one meeting, could be two meetings. You may be able to get it all done in a Zoom session. But you're leading this and you're showing your leadership in this, and you want to share those best practices with your team. You're going to share the research that you did with the team. Some of you, from what I've read, have already kind of read ahead and pulled a team together, and you utilized some of your team members to help conduct the research and use the research tool. That's great too. Just tell the story of how you did that. That's fine if you did, it's fine if you didn't. But you're going to pull that team together, and then you're going to all together look at that data and identify those gaps. And when you pull the team together and you share with them the best practices, and you share with them the checklist, and you share with them the data that you collected, and you share with them the other things you collected, and then you guys identify those gaps and analyze the gaps for teacher leadership and teacher empowerment at your school, then you're going to come up with a plan of action. And then you're going to present all of that to either your leadership team or your school leadership, whether it's the principal, whether the principal wants you to address it with the assistant principal, or like I said, with the whole leadership team. You're going to share that in the way of a presentation with that group. That's task 3. Let's go on down to address the prompt, because there are some specifics within the prompt, and the prompt and the rubric is a little bit different here. So we're going to tell you why it's a little bit different. So we're going to move on down to the prompt for task 3 of the APTL. You have to address these areas. When somebody's looking at your narrative, whether it's Dr. Neal, Dr. Sanders, myself, or the evaluator, they are going to be looking that you address these areas in your narrative, in your analytical narrative. You do not necessarily have to address all of this in your presentation on teacher empowerment to your leadership team or your school administration, but you do have to address it in your narrative. You have to address the vision for positive school environment. Documentation to support the needs to be present. A list of strategic indicators of success, long and short-term objectives, activities to address the goals and objectives, the plan to communicate it with the other stakeholders. You're presenting this to the school leadership team, but what's the plan for letting all of the stakeholders know what's going on, the whole school for what's going on? Doesn't mean that you have to do it. Doesn't mean you have to implement any of this before the end of 602, but the plan does have to be present there. Also, a timeline of the activities that you're going to arrange. How are you going to involve your stakeholders? Stakeholder involvement and buy-in. Stakeholder involvement in terms here, not necessarily your students, not necessarily your community. That'll come in 603 and some of the other evidences you do later on in the program. Your stakeholders being your teachers, your teacher assistants, the custodians, the staff at the school. How are you going to involve them and get their buy-in? And then who has specific roles and responsibility of the action plan? And then as always, how are you going to evaluate the success or the progress or the lack of the progress of the plan in a formative way so you can make adjustments as you go along, and then in the summative assessment criteria. Now, a lot of this can be addressed within the action plan itself. So you're going to present an action plan, and by that I mean indicators, goals and objectives, people who are going to play a part or are responsible for the plan, timeline of the activities, roles and responsibility and evaluation. That can all be addressed within the action plan itself. You do not have to address some of this stuff within the action plan as far as a vision for positive school environment. That can be done in the narrative. And in turn, you also, within your narrative, each of these do not have to be a subsection. Remember, we've talked to you in the past about, excuse me, about in 601, about in the rubric where it lists these different areas here. Well, you need to make that a subheading of your narrative. That's not necessary here. If you want to look in terms of, well, how's this paper going to be structured? Once again, you can refer to the APTL template. You can refer to the APTL helpful hints. That's on my Blackboard. I'm anticipating that Dr. Sanders and Dr. Neal has it on their Blackboards as well. If not, pull it out of my Blackboard internship shell. But in terms of structuring your narrative with subheadings, you kind of want to go down to the rubric for that. And we'll go down to task 3 rubric. And this is a good, there's a difference here between these number of bullets within the rubric and the number of bullets that are in the prompt. So that's why I said there's a little bit of difference there. And this is one of the times where it's going to look a little bit different. In terms of writing the task 3, this is a great, organization of your paper and writing the narrative. And you can include the information that's required in the prompt within each of these subheadings. Also, another thing that the rubric is looking for, remember, this is all about giving teachers the opportunity to lead in the building. That's the theoretical concept of this whole evidence as far as the APTL go, is being a principal and noticing where your teachers or your staff are lacking either in leadership competency themselves or opportunities for leadership, and then giving them opportunities to lead and share, have them share in the decision-making process. That's what this is all about. So that's kind of what you need to make sure you wrap your mind around this when you're writing this, is as you lead the group and looking at all the information that's been collected and you start, pulling together that growth plan, it needs to be about giving those people at your school opportunity to develop themselves as leaders. Make sure you use a lot of digital tools and visuals. You want to visualize the data that you collected, the results of the checklist, or the survey. Make sure that you include those tools and technology as far as the presentation goes. If it's a Zoom presentation, if it's a PowerPoint or some other kind of methodology that you use to share all of this with the school leadership team, then make sure that you use those visuals and you kind of show that technology. The question always comes, and this is a crazy time of year, so I'm sure it'll come up more. What if I don't get the chance to present this before I feel like I have to turn task 3 in to be reviewed and graded? I get that. If you don't, if for whatever reason the school leadership team keeps putting you off, or the principal keeps putting you off, and it keeps pushing that date back to present this, then you can go ahead in your narrative and show the presentation, and show the PowerPoint or show the action plan or show what you would present, and then you can say, this is been scheduled to present to the school leadership on March 13th at 3 p.m. And then if you get it in, which you would want to get it in before you have to upload to evaluate, then you can include that in your narrative and evaluation. That's really one of the few times that you can put it in through for review. You can get a grade on it, but then you can go back and make some adjustments to it in the final evidence narrative before you send it to task stream. And I'm just going ahead and throwing that out there because it does come up from semester to semester. I feel like right now with everything going on and scheduling in schools, it may be a little more prevalent. If you feel like that's applicable to you or going to be applicable to you, just let me know, and we'll talk you through it, and I'll pay particular attention to your narrative in task 3 to make sure we word it right, and then have a plan to make those revisions later on if need be. In task 4, and I'm going to stop for questions here in just a minute. In task 4, as I said, that's just a reflection on the competencies that you utilized during this semester. Can they be from internship hours? Yes, they can be. Can they be from the APTL? Well, they need to be from the APTL. You really need to address all of that as you go through these competencies for task 4 in the APTL. Anything that is relevant to those competencies utilized during this semester, you need to address. And the goal of the university is that by the end of MELS 602, you will have reflected on every competency. So all you need to do for this semester is the competencies that you didn't reflect on in ABSL, you reflect on in the APTL. So by the end of 602, you will have addressed each of the 21 competencies. So you don't have to, and so you go back to the ABSL and you look at the last task, the task for reflection in the ABSL. You look at what competencies you reflected on there, and whichever ones you didn't reflect on there, you reflect on for APTL task 4. Okay, so right now, I'm going to stop and see what questions you have for task 3 and task 4. Yeah, Drew, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
In task 3, are we using the same checklist that we created in task 1 as our visual, or are we supposed to come up with something maybe a little bit different, detailing a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a great question, Drew. What you developed in task 1 is going to be the foundation. If you adjusted it, or it does have a little more detail and you want to show that in task 3, you can, but it's not required. It is the checklist that you utilized in task 1. You don't have to come up with a new one. Any other questions? All right. Well, what I'd like to do now is just kind of go into task stream for a little bit. Just kind of always going to hit task stream every time just to make you aware of it, and make sure there's not any questions regarding task stream. There's always a little bit of confusion, or the opportunity for confusion when you're thinking about the leadership competencies. You got 21 competencies, and you're going to have to really work with those in all areas. As we talked about in task 4, at the end of each evidence in the program, you're going to have to reflect on some of those 21 competencies. Sometimes it's part of the 21, like it was in the ABSL. Sometimes it's the other part of the 21, like it is here in the program, and especially in 605, you're going to be asked to reflect on all the 21 competencies. And what people kind of get, seems like I said, the opportunity for confusion comes when you're thinking about the competencies that you need to reflect on for your narrative, for your evidence, versus the competencies that you need to work with when you go into task stream in your competency folio. You're working with the same competencies, but you're doing a little bit different with them in each, in whether you're in the APTL task 4, I'm just going to use that for an example, than when you're in your competency folio. And your reflection of the competencies in a task, such as APTL task 4, you're basically just, that's just a narrative. You're just talking about and telling the story, once again, of the competency, what competencies you engaged as you went through this semester and how you engaged them. That's just talking the narrative. You don't have to include any of the artifacts in these competencies. Some people do. It's okay. I send it on through. It's no harm done, but you don't have to. As you reflect within the evidence, within the task of the APTL, you just talk about those competencies. You don't have to do anything with the artifacts. That's just telling the story on your leadership, your internship hours, and what you did in the APTL. So I'm going to stop share for just a second. Then I'm going to go back and open up share again, go to my screen. I don't think I had task stream ready. Let me go off of this, go over to that. You should be looking at my browser right now, and me typing in task stream. If that's not the case, let me know. Task stream login. I apologize for not having it pulled up. I opted to get a cup of coffee instead of pulling task stream up, and I forgot about going back and pulling up task stream. So please forgive me. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about task stream. We're not necessarily going to talk about the competency folio right now. What I'd like to go into first is I'd like to just hit a quick review on the DRF. That's the direct response folio. And just kind of remind you, for 602, all you've got to do in the direct response folio or the DRF is upload the APTL when it's done. Once you get all the tasks done, put task 1 through 4 together, do the final evidence narrative, and I say ready for task stream, this is where you pop in and do it. That's all you have to do for 602. There's no competency analysis. There's no School of Ed disposition. All you've got to do in the DRF for 602 is upload the APTL. All right, so the other thing you need to do when you're in task stream, of course, is the competency folio. I need to really get that off of there. That's been coming up every time. I did that as a sample, and I either need to go ahead and submit it and evaluate myself, or delete that. Okay, so we're in your competency folio. Now, like I said, this isn't to be confused with your reflections in task 4, the APTL. You may be working with different competencies on each one. They're not necessarily the same. You may not work as with many in the competency folio as you do in your reflections. For the APTL, the only artifacts you need to upload are the artifacts that are dealing with the competencies of the APTL. Now, can you upload extra? Yes, you certainly can. But this not to be confused with the ones that you reflect on in task 4. That's why do task 4, get that reflection down pat. Once you get the APTL uploaded to TaskStream and you're waiting on it to be evaluated, now you can go in here and focus on the competency folio. And you really want to do want to stay on top of your competency folio. And as long as I'm with you from 602 all the way to 605, God willing, I'm going to continue to tell you, stay on top of that competency folio. Once you get those artifacts ready to go, once you get the evidence written and you're waiting on it to be evaluated, go right then and pull all those artifacts out and put them in your competency folio, because it's so fresh on your mind. You remember what you did, you remember kind of what competency you wanted to go with, and you don't get behind. If you ever get behind on your competency folio, it is it's difficult to catch up, just like anything else. You do not want to wait to 604 and 605. 604 is really busy with evidences. You've got the CAP and the SCIP, SCIP to do. So you're kind of dealing with 2 evidence. Both of them are short, but you're dealing with 2 evidences in 1 semester. And then 605, you're dealing with the PSYOP, which is a good evidence and not really hard to process and progress through. But then you're dealing with getting ready for graduation too. So by 603, you need to really be on top of this competency folio. And as I'm saying, you need to stay on top of it beginning with this semester, or beginning with last semester, but certainly pay attention to kind of getting the process down and being more familiar with it than you were last semester. And you, like I told you last semester, you go through. Communication is not a suggested competency dealing with the APTL. You dealt with it with the APSL. You'll deal with it again in the PSYOP. So I wouldn't worry about communication this semester. I would go through here and I would look for the competencies that have the APTL in this, in kind of like the title or the banner at the top. That's where I would focus on uploading artifacts. Conflict management. And if you ever need any help, well, what artifact can I show for conflict management that I did with the APTL? Well, a lot of that can come in with your discussion with your PLC team on reviewing the data and determining what the gaps are. Did somebody have a disagreement on a part of that? Or is there a touchy area in teacher empowerment and leadership that you dealt with in the APTL? That would be a good artifact here. Could be an email, could be minutes from your PLC. And conflict doesn't necessarily have to be, 2 people arguing and getting all heated. It could just be as we're searching the right route, as we're hammering out this growth plan for the APTL, we're trying to arrive at a consensus on what people think we need to do. Doesn't necessarily mean there were, somebody picked up a chair and threw it across the room. It's just, different views and people saying, well, I think this might be something. Well, I've got this idea. So that's, like I said, it doesn't have to, the conflict management isn't a negative. It certainly doesn't have to be a negative thing. Creative thinking, the APTL is included in this competency. Customer focus, well, that'll come in later with 603 and 604. So just go through each of these competencies and you're looking for the competencies that have the APTL in the banner at the top. And that's where the university says there are good opportunity as you progress through the APTL to show an artifact that will reflect your leadership competency in that area. Now, a lot of people say, well, what about the open-ended? The open-ended could come into play anytime. A lot of time that's internship stuff that you didn't necessarily do in the APTL, but you might have done that semester. That's a great example of conflict or of competencies. And I go back to conflict management as an example. Maybe you had to deal with a parent. Maybe the principal had you to deal with a discipline issue. Maybe you had to, facilitate an IEP meeting. Those are some open-ended things that, that's kind of like your wild cards. You can play those anytime. I don't know, for some of those of you who play poker, you can play that deuce anytime and make it whatever you mean for it to be. So you can even, if you've got something that's really good that happened this semester, that's a great, you think is a great example of delegation, and you already used the Absol and you haven't done the sit, but you really want to use this because it's part of your internship hours, well, label it as an open-ended and plug it into delegation. Like I said, those are wild cards. You can play those anytime. At the end of 605, the requirement is each competency have 3 artifacts, one from the listed evidence and then an open-ended. Can they have more? Yes, because at the end of the day, this is your presentation. This competency folio is something you can share beyond graduation from Gardner Webb as a web page of your competencies as the leader. Now, I always go back to the interview. You can share this with the interview committee, or you can share it with your principal during the evaluation. So it's yours to use past this. So you make it your own. The Gardner Webb is only requiring that you put 3 artifacts. You can put more in here if you want to. I'm just going to be looking for 3, but I do need for them to be properly labeled. If I see 3 artifacts there, I need to be able to tell which one do you mean to be attributed to the Absol, which one do you mean to be attributed to the skip, and which one do you mean to be attributed to open-ended. So in order for me to tell that, because a lot of times it's difficult, I need it to be properly labeled. And that can just be as and how you save it and upload it into the competency folio. Any questions on uploading the APTL to the DRF and the competency folio? There's a couple more things I want to share on the competency folio, but I just wanted to pause and see if there was any confusion, any questions about task 4 of the APTL reflecting on the competencies, and the competency folio and uploading artifacts to show competency. Great. Okay, just as a reminder, you're always going to see this digital learning competency here. You do not have to do anything with that. Years ago, when the program first started and we first started utilizing TaskStream, candidates did have to show proof of digital learning competencies. But we changed the program and we changed how we accredited the program to where, as we address those in the scale handbook and the syllabi and the information that we give you, that's why, for the APTL task 3, it's talking about using digital tools and visuals. Well, this is how we are helping you show competency in digital learning by default. By making that a requirement of the rubric and requiring that you put it into the narrative, then you're showing digital learning competencies by default. We leave this in here so when we are reviewed for accreditation, we can see that we've given you information on the digital learning competencies, that you're aware of what the digital learning competencies are, and that we have embedded those into the rubric. So you don't need to do anything with digital learning competencies. That's going to happen through default of meeting the requirements of the rubric. As far as your internship at the end of the semester, or whenever you get your 80 in for this semester, you put your internship log here for me to review, just like we did in 601 for the APSL. Man, I'm glad. I always do this with APSL and APTL. I'm so glad when people get into 603, because then it kind of gets away from the similarities. All right, so basically that's it. The next time we meet, it's just going to be like a question answer. I probably will go through the competency folio and TaskStream again, just to make sure that you're hearing the same thing and a constant review. But I'm gonna stop share now and see if there's any questions that I can help you with.
Hey, Dr. Bullis.
Yes, hey Todd.
I don't have a question, but my wife walked through while you were talking, and we're both teachers, and she just quipped, if you taught in 2020, you should have all digital competencies just clapped.
Yeah, good job, Ms. Tinsley. Thank you for that comment. That is exactly right. Any remote instruction, you are probably the first cohort in the history of Gardner Webb that has got a grand slam on digital competency, and that's exactly right. And I'm glad she did say that, because that brings up a good point. And thank you sincerely for doing that. All of those things that you're doing by remote instruction, remember, continue to look for opportunities to count that as part of your internship hours. What we're doing right now is we've formed a committee to look at I know some of you may already have a virtual academy. We don't. We formed a committee on doing a feasibility study on having a virtual academy. So we pulled in, some teachers, some parents, some assistant principals, some principals to kind of look at that. So just something like that, if those teachers were in the program, that would be a perfect example for internship hours. So absolutely, absolutely good comment, and thank you for making it. Cyrus, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have a question or
I
comment?
feel like it's more a comment about questions that are probably going to come. As you asked about a while back about the task 3 for the actual, and I think I'm still just trying to process everything that we're going to have to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure it's okay if after I've had a chance to think and process all of that, if I can just email you with questions on that.
Hey, brother, that's always a given. Any of y'all, always email me. You sit here and you listen to me ramble, and then I get distracted. I wasn't a good student because I got this ADHD thing going on. So, I'm looking for bunny rabbits outside the window, or anytime somebody goes across the screen, I get distracted. So I understand, you may listen to this and then think, oh, now I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the recording again. And then I'm still not going to know what he's rambling about. So, feel free to ask those questions. And like I said, always, if you need an individual Zoom or you want me to get together with a small group, that's good. But yeah, absolutely. As you process, as you think about it, different from hearing it and then setting down and doing it. Always feel free to follow up with any questions. Absolutely.
Okay, I do it. Thank you, Dr. Bullis. I do have one question. For once we submit it to the Dropbox, and you give us feedback, tell us to make whatever revisions we need to, and then we submit it for evaluation. I know that with Dr. Todd, we submitted to her first, and then she gave feedback, and then we submitted to you, and then we went back and submitted again to her. Dr. Sanders told us that it kind of just was funneled directly to you. So once we have submitted it to you and we've gotten, we've made the changes you've told us to make, and you've given us the okay on that.
Sanders, I think, is done in the past. It's been a while since we worked together. But if I remember correctly, I think all that she wants is when you get all your tasks and you do the final evidence. You pull all the tasks together for the final evidence. And I say, hey, ready for task stream. I think she just maybe might want a screenshot of that comment on that final evidence that says ready for task stream, or an email from me, or email to you that you can from me that you can forward to her that said that I'm ready for it to go to task stream. I'll ask her on that. I'll talk to her and see. But if I remember correctly, and I think Dr. Neal was the same thing. I think they just want to know that at that point in time, they just want to know that I've looked at it and I've given my okay for it to be moved on to task stream. And as long as they got some proof of that or evidence of that, then they're good with it. But I'll confirm that with both of them. That's a great question.
Dr. Bullis.
Yes, sir.
On the turn it in, are you doing that? Because I know with Dr. Todd, she did that part of it. Will we give that to you and you'll turn that in and get that score?
Yeah, Drew, I am really glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'll do the turning in as far as I know. That's a conversation that I know I've had with Dr. Sanders, and I believe I have with Dr. Neal too at the very beginning of the semester. Oh my gosh, how sweet. I'm loving this. I'm sorry, I'm loving this. Pretty baby. Uh, anyway, turn it in. Yes, thank you for mentioning that. Turn it in. You send that to me, but right now there is an issue with Turnitin in and Blackboard, and Dr. Lamb has been working on it for a couple of weeks. I haven't got an update on him from him yet on that, but there's some kind of Turnitin is looking at my internship shell and the other internship shells, as even Dr. Lamb's and Dr. Stedman, in that course is over with. Used to, we could go in and just adjust the dates, and then you could do the turn it in. Right now, turn it in views our internship shells because we've been using the same shell for 5 years, just been updating as that course has ran out of its time period. So I can't go in and make any adjustments and edit it right now. So you couldn't turn it in if you wanted to, but we are working on that. Nobody in this cohort is close to that point yet, but I just wanted you to be aware of it. There's an issue between Turnitin and Blackboard that we are resolving. I fully anticipate that it'll be resolved by the time you get done with task 4 and you have to do that final evidence. If not, we'll make adjustments and we'll do it a different way. But yeah, you will do the Turnitin process through me, through my internship shell. That has been an issue with some of the 605 students because some of them worked to kind of get ahead over the break, and I got one right now waiting to this issue get resolved so they can put their PSYOP in for a final evaluation. So it is an issue with them, but you guys are good, and like I said, I feel like we'll have that resolved before too much longer. All right, how are we? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Everybody looks a whole lot happier than they did last time. I'm really glad to hear and see that. Hey, and in 603, it'll be even easier as far as the process goes. The work's still going to be, challenging and rigorous, which is what we want. That's why we got a good reputation. But the process will get even easier in 603. All right. Well, I tell you what, for those of you who have those cute little kids by you, give them a hug and tell them that you love them. And for those of you who have kids, call them and get in touch with them, tell them you love them. For those of you who don't have kids, then, give yourself a hug and tell yourself that you love yourself. You're great people, and I have really enjoyed my time with you. I hope and pray that you all stay safe and healthy until we meet again. Reach out to me if you need anything. Thank you all.